So stunting is when a child is too small relative or too short relative to how tall healthy children are at that age. So doctors and scientists have measured many children, healthy children all over the world, including in India, to learn how tall healthy children will grow. And so if a child isn't growing as tall as a healthy child at that age should be, or in particular, if she's much too short, then we might call that child stunted. So it just means too short. Usually, richer people on average are healthier in a lot of different ways. All over the world we see that pattern. So it's a big puzzle. It's even called the Asian enigma, that children in India are shorter on average than children in sub-Saharan Africa, because people in India are richer on average. Now, there are a lot of things that people have talked about over the years, and a lot of things that probably contribute to that. And one of the original articles about this highlighted women's status as a mechanism, and it's almost certainly an important one. My own work on the Asian enigma focuses on sanitation, on the disease environment. We think of stunting as a measure of nutrition, but it's really a measure of net nutrition, of the food and nutrients you eat, net of what you lose to disease. What you lose to disease either through diarrhea in an obvious case, or just because you're not absorbing your food and putting it to good use, or because you're eating it and absorbing it, but you're having to burn up that energy fighting disease. So for all of these reasons, what really matters is not just the nutrition that you eat, but net nutrition, eating net of disease. And that's where sanitation comes in. In more than half of the households in India, people defecate in the open, meaning when they gotta go, they just go outside and squat without using a toilet or latrine. And that's bad because human feces has germs in it. It has bacteria, it has parasites, it has worms, it has all sorts of things that once kids come into contact with, it's going to make them sick. And so if children all over India are walking around, drinking water, touching with their fingers or their feet, flies are getting into their food, for all these reasons, when half the people are defecating in the open, that means a lot of kids are coming into contact with a lot of germs. That means a lot of disease. It means a lot of parasites, it means a lot of diarrhea, and it means an awful lot of something called chronic enteropathy, which basically is the reaction that your gut has to all of these disease, so your intestines aren't absorbing food as well as they could. And what it all adds up to is that children aren't growing as well as they could from the food that they eat. There's a lot of open defecation in sub-Saharan Africa also, but not as much as there is in India. 10, 20, 30 percentage points less in many countries, and sometimes less than that. And another issue that matters is that population density is a lot lower in sub-Saharan Africa. So imagine you've got two places, and in both of them, people are defecating in the open, right? But what matters is the germs. And if people live far apart, then maybe you can defecate in the open, and I'll never come in contact with your germs. But if people are living close together, then one kid is definitely going to run right into the germs from her neighbor's open defecation. So it's not just open defecation that matters, but it's the density of open defecation. It's really how likely are kids to get sick due to germs. And in India, not only do we have a lot of open defecation, we have people living pretty close to one another in international comparison. So then suddenly it's no mystery why children in India might be so short. They have a lot of disease, a lot of open defecation, and they're living so close to one another that they're almost guaranteed to come in contact with it. So when it comes to net nutrition in India, there's every reason to think that there's going to be an awful lot of disease that's going to keep children from going as tall as they could. So what needs to be done? And on the one hand, the answer is easy. People need to use toilets or latrines. We have to dispose of feces safely, and a perfectly good way to do that is with a very simple, adequately constructed pit latrine, which keeps the feces safely underground and away from children and away from flies and away from the water. It doesn't have to be a fancy toilet. A simple pit latrine is good enough. But on the other hand, that answer is too easy, because all over the parts of rural North India that I know best and where I live and work, you see these latrines very often built by the government that people just aren't using. Now, often the latrines themselves weren't good latrines to begin with. Sometimes they don't even have a pit, and so they're not even latrines at all. But lots of times there are cases where people have latrines and they're just not using them. And that illustrates a very fundamental problem, which is that a lot of people in India just don't think open defecation is a problem. A lot of people think it's okay to go outside. A lot of people don't think a latrine is healthy, and if you ask them about it, they might even think a latrine is unhealthy because, oh, they're doing that closer to their house, right? You talk with people, especially in rural areas with men, especially with older people, and they'll say, what do you mean? It's healthy to go outside for a walk. You feel the breeze in the morning, right? Aren't you supposed to go for a walk? And they don't think it's bad for you. So people need to use latrines. That's an easy answer, but it's not an easy thing to achieve. And I don't have all the answers, and I think, all of us, people all over India, NGOs, governments, researchers, we all need to be collaborating on 1,000 experiments to figure out how we can get people to stop defecating in the open and start using latrines.